You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khateeb.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm joined by a special guest, somebody I've been trying to get on the show for some time, but she's very busy. She's leading a very exciting company, and that's Maria Sainz, who's the CEO of Hyperfine. We'll get to that in a moment. A couple of quick commercial reads for you all. For those of you who are MedTech CEOs or founders, we all know how difficult it is to find early adopters for your product and get commercial traction. Sales forces are great, but they can be quite expensive. And so if you're looking to leverage AI and social media to pack your sales pipeline, me and my team here at Khateeb & Co. like to work with companies like that. We help build a digital pipeline, drive more demos, and more importantly, help you grow pipeline in a scalable way and lay that foundation. If you're interested to learn more, hit us up at khateebandco.com or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. And finally, for many of you, you guys are investors, whether you're coming from a family office, VC, or private investor, we want to help you out. Here at State of MedTech, we get a great amount of early stage companies. Sometimes they're even pre-seed before anybody knows about them. So if you're interested in investing in those kind of companies and you want to get more into it and learn more about them, check the show notes below. We have a special link for you. Fill out that form in terms of the kind of companies you're interested in, technologies that get you excited. And we try our best here to connect founders to potential investors and, more importantly, share information. It might be an investment that you might pass up on, but if anything, it's a great way to learn more. So if you're interested, check the show notes below. So with that being said, Maria, thank you so much for joining the show. And for the listeners, we got a lot of people who are interested in publicly traded companies. The stock ticker for Hyperfine is HYPR. So I am a big fan of the company, but for those who are just learning about the company for the first time, who is Hyperfine and what problem do you guys solve in the world?
Sure. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It is a phenomenal opportunity to be able to share the story of Hyperfine and what we're up to. It is phenomenally exciting technology, as it is the first FDA cleared and the only commercially available portable brain MRI. We can perform brain MRI pretty much anywhere. It moves through the hallways, rides on the elevators, and a family member can stay by your side while we are getting a brain MRI exam from you. If that is not disruptive technology, I want to know what is.
No, absolutely. And it's really amazing for those who may not be aware of it. Like when you have to get a MRI these days, it's a huge suite that you can't find in just any hospital. Like for me, God forbid, if I needed an MRI or something, I can't just go down to my local regional hospital here or an ASC. I have to go to a big hospital. I have to go to this big room and everything. And so it's really exciting to see that such powerful technology is miniaturized, right? And put in a way that's portable and accessible. You came up with this great analogy of the defibrillators, and I'm wondering if you can talk through that so that our audience can start thinking about why this portable MRI is so important.
Sure. I have been in medical technology for close to 30 years, and it is true I shared with you my vision for where this company and this technology can really go. And at the core of it, it really is about totally changing the paradigm of brain health. I thought back earlier days in my career, what was an external defibrillator? It was really a pretty heavy piece of equipment that sat on a cart and moved on a cart across the hallways of a hospital to resuscitate patients from sudden cardiac death. And where are defibrillators today? Defibrillators are all packed up in nice red or yellow, bright Velcro and canvas bags. And really everywhere you go, you find one. If you're flying like I do all the time, there's one on every one of the aircrafts. There's one on every one of the malls where we go shop. There is one at every one of the stations. My view for Hyperfine is to go from that conventional MRI experience that you just described, which also involves a pretty intimidating experience for the patient, besides a very long wait and not a very easy access, into something that is right there, available anytime, all the time, for clinicians to be able to use imaging in making the best decisions for patient care.
Absolutely. And I think as we look at the new landscape of healthcare, especially post COVID, people want access in more affordable and easier ways. And I think the most important thing is that, patients, when something goes wrong, it's not a guarantee that they follow up, go to their appointment, unless it's something that's life threatening. A lot of times it takes weeks and sometimes months or years before a patient follows up for the right kind of diagnosis or treatment. And so having this access is quite remarkable. I'm going to bring this up for those who are watching or listening, watching on Spotify or YouTube. I do want to bring up the technology so people can actually see it because it's quite remarkable. And by the way, it just says, I don't know if this is an important disclosure, but I'm going to make it anyway. Like I've purchased a Hyperfine stock because I personally love technology like this and I see it as a new standard of care. But here's the actual device. And as you can see, this is an MRI. So again, for the audience who's listening, MRIs are massive pieces of technology. You need to build out an entire suite for it. And here it is being rolled out by a nurse on an elevator. I was wondering, Maria, if you can talk just a little bit on the technical side, like what's the technical side in terms of engineering? Like how does something like this exactly work?
Sure. So first of all, the way this works is really in a democratized way. It's a plug and scan. So it is an ultra low field magnetic resonance technology. The conventional MRIs that you were describing are 1.5 Tesla in power, 3 Tesla. There are also some 5 Tesla and some 7 Tesla systems in the world. We've gone the other way. We've gone to ultra low field, so 64 millitesla. That is pretty much the same as the refrigerator magnet that we all have in our households, which provides an incredibly different safety profile. And that is why we can actually scan safely pretty much in any environment. As I said, it's plug and scan. It uses a standard sort of power outlet, and it rides through the hallways and in the elevators with the joystick sort of activation that you saw that is similar to that of a wheelchair. The ultra low field is very powerful in terms of safety profile and versatility as to what sites of care we can operate on, but it does require the image quality development over the years. So we have been using AI, and all of our software development is AI enabled, AI powered. And we're on our 9th generation of software upgrades to provide additional resolution, additional comprehensive set of images and sequences that are frequently used to diagnose conditions using MRI in the brain. We're very excited about the opportunity also to be a very important enabler in the triaging, in the diagnosis, in the treatment options for patients that suffer from both stroke and Alzheimer's disease. And we've been public about those being 2 very important clinical areas of focus, also because of the incredibly large unmet need. Seconds matter to save stroke patients from either death or profound disability. And in the case of Alzheimer's, we're talking about patients, a very large number of patients that are very debilitated and shouldn't be traveling through complicated workflow systems to access an MRI, and they need more MRIs with the newly available therapies now.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Something that I really like about this is that, first, let me ask you this, is that in terms of image quality, like how does image quality for something like Swoop compare to, let's say, like your traditional MRI?
So there's different comparisons I would like to make sure that we make. As I said before, we're really trying to expand the capacity. So we don't intend to go head to head against the conventional MRI because we feel we fit best where MRI is not readily, easily available. So I'd like to make comparisons against no MRI, which means you have 0 images, you have no imaging insight into the patient's condition, or over CT, which is widely available, but not as good as MRI in soft tissue conditions. And then there is, of course, the how is it compared to conventional MRI. We want to get, and we are at the diagnostic quality imaging level. That means that if you're a clinician and you want to answer a question, you can. For instance, is this patient having a stroke? Yes or no? You do not need a full-blown study to bring tremendous value to a timely answering of that question in an emergency room. in a spoke hospital where there may not be other equipment and you need to make a decision about transporting a patient. So the technology does look a little bit different than conventional MRI. There is a learning curve. Any of our clinicians that are routinely using it always report on them getting used to it. But the purpose of it is to answer a clinical question. It is to provide imaging insight into a full picture of a patient assessment in a very timely manner in a variety of sites of care.
I love that. And I love that you made sure to point that out, which is you're not competing directly with MRIs. You're competing with the current status quo, which is there's no access to any kind of imaging. And I think this is the part of medicine I think is so important, which is having the right level of technology available at point of care to identify what could potentially get worse and what might need further interventions and everything, versus right now, if somebody suffers an acute stroke and everything, there's only so much that's going to be revealed through, let's say, like a physical examination and everything. And again, using some imaging that's available, a lot of things are missed. By any chance, do you guys have an idea of what that market is just here in the United States in terms of missed incidences of stroke or something like that?
We don't quantify our market opportunity that way. We quantify it based on the amount of call points where a unit like this could bring tremendous clinical value. So if you look at just today, where we've started commercializing our technologies primarily for patients that cannot be safely moved inside the hospital to that MRI suite that very often is in the basement of the hospital. So those would be the critical care patients. If you look at the number of hospitals that have critical care units and pediatric critical care units where we use today, that's about a $1.5 billion opportunity. When you start looking at adding the emergency rooms of those hospitals and some of the neurology clinics for Alzheimer's patients, then we're talking about north of $6 billion opportunities. And when you start looking at nursing homes, some other community primary care settings where people could just proactively be getting brain scans from patients above a certain age or with certain risk factors, then we're talking north of $16 billion in terms of opportunity. And those numbers I just quoted are US alone. I recently came back from actually a pretty amazing trip to Bangladesh to see in a very rural setting, one of our scanners helping determine where the development of the brains of newborns was on par with what should be standard. Kids that had actually been born from anemic mothers. And it was pretty phenomenal to see how incredibly modest, not to say very poor and simple, the setup was, but the ability to plug and scan our system in, thankfully, an air-conditioned room and be able to bring these 3-month-olds born to moms with anemia and have the clinicians know whether those kids needed anything extra given their brain development at that age was the gives me the goosebumps of feeling like we can really affect health in a very profound way in any site, anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and I like that the notion that this technology is positioned to truly democratize like this approach, because again, in a lot of these settings, whether it's Bangladesh or even in rural America, a lot of stuff is not accessible. And so, of course, if you have a medical condition or an incident and you're, let's say 10, 20, 30 miles away from the nearest hospital, I think that's where a lot of the incurred healthcare costs happen. With outside of stroke and Alzheimer's, what are some other like key applications you can see this being used for, like here in the States, in terms of, again, the status quo being that there's no imaging and then having a portable MRI?
Again, I'll start by saying in our marketing and our commercialization today, we're really offering the opportunity to be scanned to patients that are incredibly frail post-operative, primarily after cardiac operations or neurosurgical operations, to make sure that they are not having other conditions like stroke in a critical care setting where they are heavily medicated, as well as have a lot of different life support systems. We have a data set that is powerful of having been able to scan patients on ECMO, which is basically life support, without having to disconnect the patients from any of that equipment, which would have been the case had they gone to the conventional MRI. Pediatrics, incredibly exciting opportunity for kids with hydrocephalus, which is a condition that requires many actually scanning exams over multiple years, to not have that be done with CT and not expose those kids to many instances of radiation exposure if they were going through that assessment using CT. Acute ischemic stroke is very large. Alzheimer's is very large, but Alzheimer's has even two flavors of large. We're very focused today on monitoring the safe administration of medications that require brain MRI as a monitoring tool. But we're also very interested in looking at imaging coupled with blood biomarkers, cognitive assessments to really monitor the progression of patients that start displaying symptoms of cognitive impairment and understand at what point they really get into being diagnosed ready for Alzheimer's, because everybody would agree that the sooner you catch those patients and intervene, the more you can offer them a stalling of the disease or a prolonging of the good years of life, rather than waiting to really access those patients with medication at a time where their condition is a little too far gone.
That makes sense. And as the saying goes, I guess all the neurologists who are listening, I keep hearing this phrase, which is like time is brain.
It is.
Yeah.
It is very true.
I'm wondering again, this is a field that's not one I've worked in so much, but what about in the realm, and again, I want to remind the listeners, Maria's the CEO of a publicly traded company, so she has to be careful about what she says, but I'm wondering, like in the world of traumatic brain injury, would Swoop be something that would be helpful in that space?
Yeah, it can be. It can be. We are not focused on that. I think in general, prevention is also something incredibly interesting. If you think about, I get mammograms every year, and some of us get colonoscopies every so often based on risk factors and family history. So why wouldn't people get a brain scan however often it makes sense to be able to catch anything early? So there are things there that are really interesting. On the sort of injury, I would tell you there's some pilot work we're doing with an organization called Athletic Heart, and they work with retired players of the NBA. And we've been pretty much part of their now annual physical for about a year or so, and they get a number of cardiac tests, and now they also get a brain scan that gets read by a neurologist and or a radiologist, and is able to actually determine whether really their brain is healthy for their age, healthy for their condition, or whether they're starting to show any symptoms. And they would be, not any symptoms, any signs that may not be presenting as symptoms yet around shrinking of the brain volume, what is called brain atrophy, a number of other considerations that if caught early, definitely have a much better chance of being addressed in a favorable manner for the patient or for the participant in this case. The opportunities are endless to really affect brain health. And I would argue we should all agree that heart and brain are probably the two most valuable organs in our body.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And again, this is my personal eye, but I would love to see, because traumatic brain injury and other instances that the brain gets injured has become more of a topic of discussion in professional sports leagues. So I would love to see the Swoop being adopted by the NFL and the UFC and places where these things happen, so that the physicians who are on site, they can immediately have access to imaging, just like they have portable ultrasounds now. They should have something like this in terms of access. Yeah. Now, recently, and I was personally very happy about this because the stock was trending upwards and doing very well. You guys had some very exciting news come out. Tell us about the new news and what does that mean for the company?
Sure. So we've been very clear that there's a number of things that are really important and exciting for the company, because not only are they exciting developments, but they translate into good business outcomes. Been talking about our international expansion, talked about a lot our stroke program and our Alzheimer's program. And we have really been somewhat bragging about how much of an innovation machine we have been with our subsequent releases of AI-powered software. And I would say we've had news flow on all those areas in the last few weeks alone. Announced that we have a couple more very strong partners for commercialization in Europe with a new distributor partner in Germany and also one in the Nordic countries that gives us access to more than a handful more markets in Europe. We just this week got our 9th generation of software upgrades cleared by the FDA. And this is a really exciting time because we're able now to continue to move up on resolution, but also reduce the speed that it takes to acquire images, and different use cases may require a little bit of both. But we have just more sheer capability, what we can do at this ultra low field portable MRI level. And then we've had two very exciting pieces of news with a recently or soon to be published article in the Annals of Neurology that includes a subset of our data around acute ischemic stroke. And then we are headed to Philadelphia for something called the AAIC, which is a very large Alzheimer's meeting. Never showcased our technology at one of them, so this is a first for us. But we're also going to have a couple of poster presentations there on very preliminary data that some clinicians have started to gather and using our scanner for this Alzheimer's ARIA monitoring, which is a very exciting new indication. It's been positive developments across all of the areas that really drive our business, and that's been great to see.
That's fantastic. And I love hearing that, just because I feel that and this is why I love medtech and medical devices, which is the ability to intervene sooner than usual. And for example, I was discussing with some GI specialists the idea that if you have a family history of colon cancer and everything, you don't wait to get screened like in your late 40s and 50s. You do it as soon as possible. And I think the unfortunate thing about Alzheimer's is that it's one of those things that, for the most part, because of how little access we had to better technology, we just accept it as it is. And the only time that we talk about it is when we see a loved one degenerating, and then you get the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, versus something like this allows people with that risk profile to get monitored and checked like on an annual basis. Because once you start seeing any kind of signs of changes, you can start intervening with better therapies, et cetera, and provide better quality of life. So I love that mission and vision behind that.
And that is very true. I think you mentioned, I would say on Alzheimer's, there is a very strong push out there to bring Alzheimer's care down to primary care, only because of the incredibly large numbers of patients that suffer from it today, and many more that will with an aging population. It's a global problem, and there's not ever enough specialty care capacity at the psychiatry or neurology level to really take care of the population that unfortunately will suffer from this condition. So the push is to find ways and solutions for primary care to engage in the screening, the monitoring, the treating of the patient population with Alzheimer's, only because that would be the right capacity medically to tackle how big of a problem it is. And we feel that's why this becomes an even more exciting opportunity for us, because that's exactly where our value proposition shines its best. We can democratize the use of the brain scanning with MRI by the use of our system. The one feature about our system that I did not mention is that we do not require an MR technologist to operate the scanner. It operates like a Spotify playlist off of an iPad. So it is no different than operating a cell phone. It is plug and play, and it's literally very intuitive. So we can actually let this be handled by a variety of different levels of healthcare personnel at any of the sites of care. And just like you mentioned before, with COVID, people don't necessarily look to go into the big hospitals for their care and are happy to go around the corner to a smaller office near home. We also believe that we can play a role in neurology offices and are working on a process to get accredited so that we can actually build a business in neurology offices and offer those clinicians an imaging modality that is accessible, easy to use, and provides significantly valuable insight on determining really the patient that comes with, I've been having headaches for the last 6 months, they're getting worse, what can I have? There is a clinical assessment that is, of course, really important, but imaging definitely adds a lot to that interaction with the patient. You can send them for imaging, you can wait for imaging, you can hope they come back, and then in an N number of weeks can have that more robust view, or you can have it here and now. If I were the patient, I think I know what I'll pick.
Oh, 100%. And it's a direct impact on healthcare costs. What I think is very interesting is this concept of scaling the abilities of a specialist through primary care. I think for the longest time, primary care was neglected in terms of being a low-tech setting, but it is really at the forefront of patient care. And so, there's not enough neurologists to service the patient population. And so and then considering that we're seeing a lot of consolidation in healthcare, a lot of primary care offices are consolidating. And so they're having an influx of patients and having this kind of technology there. And I'm wondering, is this kind of one of the value props for you released your 9th generation AI powered software? Is that coupled with a clinician will help identify things. So that way it's not purely just on the clinician to try and identify this, because everybody's eyes and clinical approach is different. And so the software is another democratizing feature to this. Is that correct?
It is. If you think about it, I think you said it right. We now have the right capacity because you have the proximity to the patient, you have the widespread, you have the sheer capacity, and you have the location of that capacity. The next step is a tool that can get them the right information, but that is accessible to them. That means affordable, and that means easy to learn, easy to operate. And then the third component, I would argue there where software helps, is software and AI in general, trying to not only translate a little bit of what the imaging says in our case, what the technology yields as output into decision making. So there is also a lot of technology, and we're doing some of it ourselves, and we're open to partnering with other platforms on looking at how do you take these images, and for a primary care person that is not a specialized neurologist and sees a tummy ache, an Alzheimer's patient, a cut on an ankle, and just a depressed middle-aged someone all in the same day, how can you take brain images and translate them into actionable information? So there is also a third component here, which is that ability to take the sheer result of our exams and start providing it in a more insightful way to primary care. I don't think we're there yet, but there's a number of companies pursuing that. And the question is, will they just consume high field images from the conventional scanners, or can they also consume our images and turn them into actionable clinical steps for a primary care person to feel comfortable in really doing it at their level? Because if we end up just having to refer all these patients, we're back where we started, capacity bottleneck.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering also just on the business model side, because the thing about that I hear from a lot of founders and CEOs of like very new technologies is that sometimes when they go to a hospital or to an administration for purchase, because it's a new technology, sometimes administration doesn't know what to categorize it as and how to exactly budget for it. Have you guys experienced that in terms of your business model? It seems like it's a dual of capital equipment and software, unless I'm mistaken.
No, we sell right now, our business model is we sell our device as an upfront capital purchase, and then that covers also a year's worth of guarantee at the technical level and the software upgrades. And then we charge an annual amount that encompasses both software upgrades as well as technical service. The complexity hasn't been in the price tag by design. The device and the system is affordable, and it is a small fraction of what a conventional MRI system plus the fitting of a facility entail. But it is a connected device, it's a radiology device, it's also a clinical device, and it's capital. So think about the amount of people in a hospital, administratively speaking, needs to get involved and sign off. So there is a little bit of the time it takes to get all of the stakeholders aligned. I wouldn't say it's the price tag, but it's how many different points of the hospital it touches. There's a multi-year contract, so there's legal. There's a connected device, so there's cyber. There's a radiology department that weighs in, but ultimately doesn't reside in the critical care unit. So there's the clinicians there. So that alignment of multiple stakeholders and the administrative process is the one that has been taking a little bit longer and been harder just to predict, because it's not a cookie cutter system that you just follow.
On the topic of clinicians, technology adoption is always fascinating, especially with a specific implant. So it's obviously, the stakeholder is the surgeon, right? In this case, a lot of different stakeholders. And I've seen like different clinicians post about the technology online. Who have you found to be like a surprising stakeholder that really has embraced the technology and helped drive the adoption? Is there one that stands out, or?
There's always one that stands out, but I can't describe her or him. I know what they look like for us, and they're part of our very engaged users group. And they come in different shapes and sizes. And some are critical care specialists, some are neurosurgeons, some are stroke neurologists, some are neurointensivists. But they have that appetite for the risk and the reward that comes with really transforming care. And they are willing to put up with a little bit of that learning curve to learn how these images look. They're also a little bit more risk takers. They are really the fabric of the early adopters, but we have them in neurosurgery. We have them in critical care. We also have them in neurology, in stroke neurology, in neuroradiology. And again, we've now assembled them as a community of those early users that have a tremendous amount of energy individually, but just incredibly powerful energy as a group.
That's fantastic. And I think what's interesting also is that at least in medtech, when you provide a new access point to better imaging, better data, et cetera, it changes standard of care and how you consider treating things. So like we didn't have portable MRIs before. And so there's a lot of like unknowns, but now that you are changing the status quo, it lends itself to like new guidelines. I'm wondering if you're able to share anything on that. Have there been any insights from the clinical field in terms of this could be a potentially like new standard that we could start doing?
So there's a number of things. On the one hand, it is brain MRI. So we do have a very broad indication for use. So when I talk about a lot of the clinical data and things like that, they are still within just brain imaging. You can do brain imaging in a stroke patient. You can do brain imaging in a kid. You can do brain imaging in an elderly Alzheimer's patient. And all of that is covered by our cleared indication. Because it is brain MRI, we also have existing reimbursement that we can tap onto from a development of a new medical market. That is a very privileged position to be on. And now we're working more and more with, as they define really what they use, and we see ourselves being included in more and more of the things that are not, there may be less hardcore guidelines, but they're more around protocols. There were revised guidelines from ACR, which is a very important organization lately that at least acknowledge the existence of low field and portable MRI and start talking about really what is the right level of training for someone to operate it. Those developments are definitely an encouraging development for us. And it has taken a number of years to start working with pioneers for them to really showcase how this really has brought value to their practices, to their institutions, to their MRI capacity, to then start seeing some of those organizations start by acknowledging and making room for really this as a modality. As I say, it is incremental to what exists. It doesn't intend to compete with what exists, just render brain MRI more accessible, more equitable, more possible in many more sites of care.
That makes fantastic. It makes sense. I wonder also on the notion of Alzheimer's in an aging population. I'm wondering, again, this is an area I don't know, so this could be a terrible idea. If you look at states like Florida that have these like massive nursing home facilities and communities, they also have internally like their own clinics and everything. And I'm wondering if those are some other areas that this technology can be essentially used. Again, like the idea is reducing the friction for patients to get access to something like this. Have you guys seen any interest from that area at all?
There is a lot of interest. And when I was hearing your question and your comments, it triggered my, we've always talked about, we are bringing MRI to the patient. We're not asking the patient to go to MRI. So that's a nice analogy. The older, the frailer the patient is, the more it makes sense to bring them the technology and not ask them to go through the hassle of going to the technology. We are seeing demand for that. Right now, we have the opportunity to work in any healthcare facility for as long as there is an MD. It is really a facility that is one of our possible sites of care. We're also seeing demand and interest for mobile care, some of the care that really travels to rural and distant locations. We haven't done all of the required testing to be able to really put it on a truck and have it go from place to place and scan on a truck. But that is definitely an area of interest where we get a lot of questions. We've seen the more remote the location, the more there is an interest to bring it to the patient, because the bigger the hassle it is for the patient to come to the MRI. Driving 30 miles is a nag in most of America. If you're talking about remote Canada, we're talking about a several-hour flight to get to an MRI. So there are places there where we're really talking about what would it look like to really bring it closer and potentially in a mobile unit. And that might be something that we decide to do in the future as well. It's right around the technology testing more than anything else.
That's fascinating to hear that, because it opens up a telemedicine pathway, right? And putting it on a truck to go directly to patients' homes is really interesting. There's plenty of rural areas in America, but especially in Canada, like when you get up to Saskatchewan and stuff, it's really in the middle of nowhere. So,
well, I told you, Bangladesh, I was in the middle of nowhere, very rural facility, and we were able to acquire scans. And of course, as rural and as modest as it is, there's always internet. So the one other thing that you can easily do is send those images somewhere so that someone with the right expertise can give you a read and can give you some recommendation as to what to do about a patient. So that's part of the magic of the world in which we live today. Sometimes the physical access is very challenging, but the virtual access is very easy. So for as long as you place the scanner in the right location, then the local healthcare providers do not need the level of sophistication that may be required to interpret the images, to issue a recommendation about care, but that can actually be undertaken virtually very easily.
that's fantastic. Just out of curiosity, right now for Swoop, what countries is it currently available in outside of the US?
So we operate in 20 different countries. Commercially, we've talked quite a bit about our expansion into Europe. We also have a new distributor partner and have started the regulatory process to really get approval in India. And then through a partnership with the King's College in London and funding from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we've been able to put scanners in countries in Africa and Southeast Asia. So there are scanners in India, in Bangladesh, in South Africa, in Malawi. I'm probably going to forget some, in Botswana, and a number of really remote and challenging places to get to, but where we're scanning a lot of pediatric patients.
That's fantastic. And it's good that the list is so long that you can't remember all the countries. So
that's a good thing. You're right.
It's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally a good thing.
It's not Alzheimer's yet.
and again, thanks so much for carving out some time to come on the show. But just as we wrap up, you mentioned that in the near future, there's going to be a paper being published. Is there a potential conference that you guys will be sharing more on that publication, or what can you tell us about that?
So the next big clinical milestone is really the Alzheimer's conference. And that one is at the very end of July. It's in Philadelphia this year. It's the first time we're bringing a scanner so that people can really see for themselves what the patient experience would look like as a healthy volunteer getting in the scanner. And there are going to be 2 poster presentations from 2 of the institutions we're working with in the US on our Alzheimer's program. And it's really going to be the tip of the iceberg because the Alzheimer's program was launched just earlier this year. But it's very exciting that within a few short months, we're able to at least start showing some of the very, very preliminary data. And we're excited. We're excited about the opportunity to be in the big show of Alzheimer's, to bring our scanner to that community and to showcase how the clinicians we're working with feel about the opportunity for our ultra-low field portable scanner to help in this very large and very debilitating condition for too many patients out there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and for those who are wondering, the conference is AAIC 2024.
Correct.
And then for the rest of the year, again, for the clinicians who are listening, are there any other major conferences you guys will be at? So if somebody's at that conference, they can come and see the technology in person?
Sure. There's a number of conferences yet the balance of this year. So there will be a stroke conference called SV later in the year. There's always a very large radiology conference, our SNA, right after Thanksgiving in Chicago. And there will be one more Alzheimer's meeting, which is scientific and international in nature. It's called CTAD, and this year it is in Madrid, Spain.
Very nice. And for the listeners who are wondering for more, I do want to direct them to your website. You guys have a tab on there for upcoming events and webinars and a lot of great resources. So the website is Hyperfine, HYPERFINE.io. So go to hyperfine.io to learn more. And then Maria, you're relatively active on LinkedIn, so I want to encourage our listeners to go and follow you on there. And then just again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to hopefully have you back post-publication so we can talk more about that. But I just want to thank you and the team over at Hyperfine, essentially doing everything necessary to bring MRIs to the patient and making healthcare better.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share the story. It's an incredibly interesting journey, and I'm super excited about what the future is going to hold for the patients that we can help with our technology and with the way we're thinking about transforming healthcare. So it's been great talking to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to thank our listeners. Be sure to go check them out, hyperfine.io. If you want to learn more on the stock side, their stock ticker is HYPR. I want to make sure I got that correct. Yes, HYPR. So I'm your host, Omar M. Khateeb. This has been another episode of the State of MedTech. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Give us 5 stars and write a review. We're the #1 show in the industry for a reason, because I always remind you guys to do this. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.